Hello everyone, it's your boy Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. This video is going to be blisteringly quick. And I know when I say that, people often say, yeah dude, 3 hours later. But no, really, this video is going to be blisteringly quick and to the point. As to the point as I could possibly be. I want to talk about perspective. And perspective from the context of media and the way media organizes stories and organizes narratives. Understand, there are a billion stories that you can talk about. Media selects the specific ones that it wants to get across to its audience. It does so because it's monetized to do so. The information and the media that it gives the public is not necessarily the thing that the public necessarily needs to hear at that moment. It's what they deem to be profitable for themselves to give. There's a difference in those things. It's one thing if media is nonprofit and media is just out there doing the best that it can, investigative journalists, etc., etc. That's certainly not the situation in which we find ourselves. Whether it's incompetence, whether they're useful idiots, whether they're in on it and just lie, I have no idea which one it is. But certainly the media organizations, the corporate media organizations, make determinations about who they want to hire and who they want to put on the air. They're not going to put on air somebody that's contrary to the point of view that they themselves want to espouse. Why would they ever do that? They hire the people. People always make this thing as if these guys are objective. They have a certain workable point of view, and they're hired to have a certain workable point of view. And it's one that doesn't necessarily attack the system itself. Now, when I do my show, I like to focus on this thing of context. I'm a left-leaning, I'm a lefty. I'm a full-throated, unapologetic lefty. That being said, I try to be honest. I'm not a lefty that's affixed my value system, affixed to a party. My value system is fixed to humanitarian concerns. Yes, I tend to lean to a libertarian slant in some of these things, but it's consistent. And I try to be honest in the way that I go about it, and especially in the way that I explain it. If I'm explaining something that's not consistent with what I've said that my values are, well, you can see it. That's the way I've done my show. I try to expand to a wider context than the narrow focus that the media takes on things. To give you an example of what I mean, I want to use True Blood as an example. So, in the episode of True Blood, when True Blood first came out, Sookie had the capacity to hear people's thoughts, was infatuated with a vampire, Bill Compton. Bill Compton was my favorite character on the show. He had this southern drawl. The man was fucking awesome. Now, Sookie had, there was an unrequited love towards Sookie by Sam. Sam was a shapeshifter. Now, Sam didn't realize that there was anyone else just like him as a shapeshifter. He didn't quite understand it. Nobody else knew about it, but he used to follow her around as a dog. He would follow her around. She thought it was just some raggedy dog that hung out at the bar, not realizing that that was actually Sam, who was in love with her and who was cuddling up her bedside as a dog just to be close to her. She didn't like him that way. He was in friend zone. He was in perpetual friend zone. This is the image of Sam. This loyal, friendly, affable, kind-hearted guy who owns a bar, and, you know, that's his image. He's in love with Sookie, and because he's in love with Sookie, he comes across as this kind of almost a pity saw case. I didn't particularly like Sam. It wasn't anything against Sam. I just didn't particularly like him. I like Bill. And because Sam was in love with Sookie, and I personally like Bill, I had somewhat of a slant against Sam. It's what it is. It's a show. 2 years later, I think it's 2 years later, the camera widens its focus, and you get a larger context all at once. And you see Sam put a bullet in a man, shoots a man, and throws his body into the swamp. And at that moment, you're like, oh! Sam hadn't changed. Nothing about Sam changed. What changed was your perspective. You had a larger context. The other stuff that took place early on in the show in the first 2 years, when you got all this idea of Sam and everything else, those things were still true. The larger context is also true. Meaning Sam is the same guy that murdered those guys, but he is also the same guy that's in love with Sookie. He is also the same guy that went through certain changes that made him a little bit more passive in the way in his manner, in the way he's going about his affairs. Doesn't necessarily mean that's not in him. Doesn't necessarily mean he didn't do that. He did do that. He did murder somebody and throw their body in the swamp. Sam has a dark streak in him. But you didn't see that in the first 2 seasons. Context shows you that. Context reveals that. Context reveals he did some good stuff. He did some bad stuff. He's a person living in this particular society. Well, in that society anyway, on that show. I just want to make the point. If you're coming at this and the only thing you're focusing on is the fact that Sam shot somebody, threw their body in a swamp. If somebody is shitting on Sam, is trying to attack him and go after him and bash him and everything else and wants you to be angry at him and wants you to attack Sam, that's what they're going to say. He shot a man, threw his body in a swamp. He's a horrible person. He's a horrible, disgusting person, etc., etc., etc. If they want you to think that Sam is an awesome person and an angel and is just this good-hearted person, then they're not going to talk about the body in the swamp. They're going to talk about the other thing. It depends on what you narrow your focus down on. In my show, at the very least, I try to widen the focus and say, look, the truth of it is both. Whatever the story. I may fuck up. I may have foibles. I'm not doing it on purpose if I do. But that's my goal. I tend to lean to the left. Yes. You already know my perspective is to the left when I say it. Even when I come out, when I open my mouth, I'm going to have a certain bias towards issues cutting to the left. But my goal is not to focus on Sam's thing with Sookie, nor is it to only focus on the fact that Sam shot somebody in the head and threw his body in the river. It's focused on all of it. That he gave his life for the town. That he gave his life for this particular person, or was willing to give his life for this particular person. That he did this in that situation. All of it. My goal is all of it. Media. Even lefty independent media. Or even right-wing media. Media in general. Politicians. When they have something that they want to get across, when they have something they want to go after, they tend to narrow the focus. Narrowing the focus helps get their point across. Sometimes they narrow the focus because that's the most important thing. If this person committed some kind of genocide, then I don't really care if he was nice to his dog, he committed a genocide. So don't misunderstand me. Sometimes that narrow focus is the main thing, is the thing that you should be focused on. It is the main subject of the piece. But oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes there's a wider point of view. I just try to get perspective. That's what I try to do in this show. It's not whataboutism. They like to call it whataboutism. It's not whataboutism. They call it whataboutism because they don't want to address the actual context. That there's a more complex reality than just the simplistic, narrow, selective justice that they often like to use when they're going after somebody, particularly when you're talking about a foreign nation. So, like I said, this one was going to be quick. I had no intention of this one being long. I just wanted to talk about this thing of context and the lens. What is the lens that you're using? How narrow the focus of that lens? What happens when you widen that lens and you get a wider picture of that? Does that change your perspective of the way you're viewing this particular event? If the answer is yes, then wider focus was necessary to even understand the perspective of the event. When the media, when CNN is talking about Israel, and they're acting as if this is just a conflict between these two, we don't know why this conflict exists. And Palestinians just so happen to get hurt. But they don't make the attribution that Israelis murdered and shot into a crowd full of peaceful Palestinians. They don't make the connection between the two. Even though they give you the basic information that there was a conflict, people got hurt, bullets fired, etc., etc. But they don't give you the context that you need to understand the situation, nor do they give you the honesty of Israel fired into a crowd of Palestinians and they should be held up on war crimes. Even if you don't want to go that far. At the very least, get across, Israel fired into a crowd of Palestinians that were peacefully marching. I mean, I'm just saying, there may be some on CNN that gives this straight shot. I don't want to necessarily say all of it because I don't necessarily watch all of CNN, so I don't know what goes on in each and everything on CNN. But I have seen shows on CNN where they would completely leave out the context of what's taking place, because either we're an ally with that particular country or we have some kind of political allegiance to which those organizations, those media organizations, tend to also bow down to. Saudi Arabia is another offender if you're having a conversation about Yemen. All I'm saying is my goal in this is just to be honest, just to tell the truth. when they're looking out at the world and they're giving you a perspective that's from the bias of America itself, I don't want to give you that perspective that's from a bias of America. I just want to give you the perspective of what's taking place. That bias gets us into wars. That bias makes it look like other people are doing more things than what those people are actually doing from the context of wider nations and what the things of things that the nations do. This is what took place. This is the history of it. This is how we have acted in the world around it. This is how other nations have acted in the past about it. That's my goal. I don't want to give just, this is the American perspective. I just want to give, this is the perspective from a humanistic perspective, from a humanistic point of view. That is the goal of this show. And when you're watching media, whether it's me, whether it's something on MSNBC, whether it's whatever you're watching, you always have to be mindful of what is the person's bias and what are they trying to get across when they're giving across that particular case, that particular story. Be aware of the bias. It's in everything that you watch. It's in this show. It's in some other show. It's on the news, because all perspectives are relative to one another. So all perspectives to some degree are going to have some level of bias built into it. The question is not if it's biased. The question is, what is it biased towards? So I will leave it at that. This one didn't mean to be long. I just wanted to talk about this thing of perspective and why I think context is so important. Media often weaponizes context. Politicians weaponizes context. I don't want to weaponize it. I just want it to be true. I just want it to be true. I may not always be perfect at it, being a person, but that is my goal. So I'll leave it at that. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. I'm pushing this up. I need to walk the dogs, but yeah, I have house duties. My wife is gone now, so I have to take care of the kids. But I'm going to be back for a few live shows after this. I have a few that I think are interesting. Sky News burying a news story because they didn't necessarily like the way the interview went. It didn't go according to script, so they buried it. That's great. And there's another one. I can't think of it off the top of my head. There's another one. So I'll see you guys in about 20-30 minutes. Thanks, guys.